What would your life look like if you finally stopped doubting yourself and decided to rebuild everything from the inside out? Imagine waking up with quiet confidence, knowing you're no longer running from your potential, but walking straight into it, calmly, privately, and with unwavering discipline. This audiobook will guide you through that transformation, helping you sharpen your mind, strengthen your habits, and release the old versions of yourself that kept you stuck. Because real change doesn't begin with noise or applause. It begins in silence, when you decide you deserve better and refuse to keep living on repeat. So ask yourself, what happens when you truly commit to your own growth? What happens when you finally become the person your heart has been telling you to be all along? If you're ready to find out, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Quiet Decision. Change never begins with noise. It doesn't begin when the world is watching. It doesn't begin when you announce your plans or when you feel a sudden wave of motivation. Real change begins in silence. It begins in a moment no one else even notices. A moment that belongs only to you. Maybe it happens late at night when the world is asleep and the noise inside your mind finally becomes too loud to ignore. Maybe it happens in the middle of an ordinary day, sitting in a car, standing in the shower, staring out of a window, feeling something inside you whisper, "You were meant for more than this version of yourself." Not more money, not more status, not more attention, but more alignment, more peace, more self-respect. And in that quiet moment, you don't scream. You don't declare anything to anyone. You don't rush to tell the world your plans. You simply decide. You decide that you are tired of breaking promises to yourself, tired of living on repeat, tired of escaping into distractions and pretending it's normal to feel numb, lost, or disconnected from your own life. You realize something painful, but freeing. Your life did not get stuck because you were unlucky. It got stuck because you kept postponing the person you were meant to become. And now you are done postponing. You don't want dramatic change. You don't want chaos. You don't want a loud transformation that burns fast and disappears. You want quiet, steady, honest growth. Growth that no one else needs to clap for. Growth that comes from keeping your word to yourself. Growth that feels clean, peaceful, grounded. You decide that from this moment forward, you are no longer negotiating with your excuses. You are no longer letting your emotions dictate your future. You are no longer waiting to feel ready, because you finally understand. Readiness is not something you wait for. It is something you become by moving forward anyway. And in that stillness, you feel something shift. You no longer crave attention, you crave transformation. You no longer chase approval, you chase alignment. You no longer seek escape, you seek responsibility for your own life. This decision does not come with fireworks. There is no applause, no audience, no celebration. Just you and the quiet realization that your life will no longer be controlled by old habits and repeating patterns. You are choosing yourself now. You are choosing discipline over distraction, healing over avoidance, peace over chaos, becoming over pretending. And for the first time in a long time, you feel honest with yourself. Not harsh, not self-hating, just honest. Honest about your weaknesses, but also honest about your strength. Honest about your fears, but also honest about your courage. Honest about how far you've fallen, but also honest about how far you can still rise. This is the quiet decision. The moment your life begins to turn gently toward a new direction. No rush, no pressure, no drama. Just a deep inner commitment. You will no longer abandon yourself. From this point forward, you walk differently. You think differently. You speak to yourself differently. because you didn't just decide to change your life. You decided to become the kind of person who keeps promises to themselves. And that is where every true transformation begins. In silence, in honesty, in the quiet decision to finally become who you were always meant to be. Chapter 2. Meeting yourself honestly. The greatest journey you will ever take is not across oceans, mountains, or cities. It is the journey inward, toward the truth of who you really are. Most people never make that journey, not because they cannot, but because it requires something many are afraid to face: honest self-reflection. It is easier to keep moving, easier to stay distracted, easier to point at someone else, something else, life itself, and say, "That is why I am not where I should be." But growth begins when you stop running from yourself, when you sit with your thoughts, and instead of escaping them, you gently ask, "Who am I really when no one is watching?" Not the version the world sees, not the role you perform, not the mask you wear to be accepted, but the real you, the quiet you, the you that only reveals itself in silence. At first, it is uncomfortable, because honesty strips away the layers you've built to protect yourself. Layers made of excuses, denial, delay, false positivity, and self-narratives that soothed you but kept you stuck. You begin to notice patterns. You notice the moments when you choose distraction instead of discipline. The moments when you give up, not because you cannot continue, but because discomfort arrived. The moments when you shrink yourself to fit into places you don't even belong in. You notice how often you say the words, "I'll start later." Later becomes a habit, a personality, a lifestyle, and slowly, you see how much of your life has been shaped by avoidance. But here is the important truth. Honesty is not self-punishment. Honesty is self-liberation. You are not here to attack yourself. You are here to understand yourself so deeply that you finally stop living as a stranger inside your own life. You begin to see the habits that drain you, the environments that weaken you, the relationships that silence your spirit, the thoughts that repeat like background noise, convincing you that you are less than you truly are. You see how often you broke your own trust by promising change, but walking back into the same patterns. And for the first time, you do not justify it. You do not sugarcoat it. You do not cover it with motivational slogans. You simply whisper inwardly, "This is where I am, and that is okay, but I will not stay here." Because meeting yourself honestly means accepting two truths at the same time. You are responsible for where you are, and you are powerful enough to change it. Honesty becomes your mirror, a mirror that does not lie and does not flatter. It shows you your potential right beside your avoidance, your strength right beside your fears, your dreams right beside the habits that betray them. And in that reflection, you discover something incredible. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not hopeless. You are simply unfinished. There are parts of you that were never guided, parts that were wounded, parts that learned to survive instead of grow. And now, instead of blaming or denying, you begin to understand. You begin to see the story behind your behaviors, the reasons you hesitate, the reasons you run, the reasons you hide. Understanding does not excuse it, but it allows you to heal it. And healing does not happen through force. Healing happens through presence. So you become present with yourself. You notice your thoughts. You notice your reactions. You notice your emotional triggers. You notice the moments when you want to give up. And instead of obeying that feeling, you simply observe it. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. And slowly, beautifully, your relationship with yourself begins to change. You no longer fear silence, because silence is where you meet your truth. You no longer fear stillness, because stillness is where you hear your deepest needs. You no longer fear honesty, because honesty is no longer a weapon. It is a compass, and this compass begins to guide you inward, toward clarity, direction, self-respect, and inner alignment. You realize, growth was never about becoming someone else. Growth is about returning to the person you were always meant to be, before fear shaped you, before insecurity limited you, before the world told you to shrink. Meeting yourself honestly is the foundation of everything that follows, because you cannot heal what you refuse to see. You cannot change what you refuse to admit, and you cannot build a solid life on top of self-deception. So you choose truth, even when it is hard, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it makes you face parts of yourself you once tried to hide. And with every layer of honesty, you reclaim a piece of your power, the power to choose, the power to grow, the power to rewrite your story, not from ego, but from awareness. This is the quiet work most people never do, but you are doing it, patiently, gently, courageously, and it is here, in this honest meeting with yourself, that your real transformation begins. Not loudly, not dramatically, but softly, deep within, where your true life lives. Chapter 3. Rebuilding the relationship with yourself. There comes a point in your journey where you realize something quietly heartbreaking. You have spent so much of your life trying to be there for others, trying to prove yourself, trying to be accepted, understood, valued, loved, that somewhere along the way, you stopped being there for yourself. You started breaking your own trust. You said you would change, and you didn't. You said you would begin, and you delayed. You said you would walk away, yet you stayed. You said you would heal, yet you kept reopening the same wounds. Not because you are weak, not because you are lazy, not because something is wrong with you, but because no one ever taught you how to have a relationship with yourself. You were taught how to sacrifice, how to tolerate, how to endure, how to survive, but you were not taught how to care for yourself without guilt, speak kindly to yourself without shame, protect your peace without apology, stand up for yourself without fear. So, Chapter 3 is about something sacred. Rebuilding the relationship with the one person who will never leave you, yourself. This is not quick work. This is not loud work. This is not glamorous work. This is patient, slow, internal work. It begins with a realization. You cannot keep treating yourself like a burden and expect your life to feel light. You cannot talk to yourself like an enemy and expect to move like a friend. You cannot doubt yourself constantly and expect your soul to walk with confidence. So you begin watching the way you treat yourself. You notice the tone of your inner voice. You notice the words you whisper to yourself when nobody hears you. And you realize, if another person spoke to you the way you sometimes speak to yourself, you would walk away. But you haven't walked away, because you cannot walk away from your own mind. So instead, you begin to change the way it speaks, not with fake positivity, not with empty affirmations, not with loud declarations you don't feel yet, but with gentle honesty. You begin saying things like, I'm learning, I'm trying, I made a mistake, but I am not a mistake. I am worthy of my own patience. I am allowed to begin again. You realize you don't need to shout confidence. You simply need to stop attacking yourself. And, slowly, your inner world softens. You begin to feel safer inside your own mind. And that is one of the greatest forms of peace a human being can ever experience. Because so many people live in a constant internal war, a war between who they are and who they think they should be, a war between their past and their future, a war between their fear and their longing. But rebuilding the relationship with yourself means laying down your weapons. It means finally saying, I am on my own side now. You stop chasing perfection. You stop competing with others. You stop comparing your timeline to lives that look polished on the surface. You begin to understand. Your life is not late. Your journey is not behind. You are not supposed to be anyone else. There is no fixed schedule for growth. There is only alignment and honesty and showing up for yourself daily. You also begin to notice the ways you abandoned yourself in the past. You abandoned yourself when you stayed where you weren't respected. You abandoned yourself when you laughed while hurting inside. You abandoned yourself when you said yes while your soul was screaming no. You abandoned yourself when you dimmed your light so others would not feel uncomfortable. But now, you are learning something new. Loyalty to yourself is not selfishness. It is self-respect. And when you begin to respect yourself internally, your outer world slowly rearranges itself to match. You stop tolerating disrespect, not loudly, but clearly. You stop forcing yourself into places you don't belong. You stop begging for clarity from people who feed you confusion. You stop trying to explain your worth. You no longer chase. You choose, because you have finally chosen yourself. And choosing yourself doesn't mean isolating from the world. It means you enter the world whole, instead of fractured. It means you give from fullness, not from depletion. It means your relationships deepen, because they are no longer built from fear or dependency, but from truth. And truth is the most beautiful foundation human connection can ever stand on. But there is another part of rebuilding the relationship with yourself. You must forgive yourself. Forgive the version of you who didn't know better. Forgive the version of you who stayed too long. Forgive the version of you who agreed to less than they deserved. Forgive the version of you who broke their own heart repeatedly. Forgive the one who feared loneliness and accepted pain instead. Forgive the one who was learning life the hard way, because they didn't yet know a softer way existed. This forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It is about releasing the chains you wrapped around your own spirit. It is about saying, I did the best I could, with the awareness I had at that time. And now, I will do better. Not because I hate who I was, but because I finally love who I am becoming. You begin to trust your decisions again. You begin to hear your intuition again. You begin to feel your own energy again. You realize how long you've been numb, how long you've been on autopilot, how long you've been performing life instead of living it. And so, you reclaim your presence. You slow down. You breathe deeper. You notice life again. You notice the way light falls through a window. You notice the way silence feels like medicine. You notice the way calmness fills a room like oxygen. You are no longer racing outward. You are returning inward. And in that return, you discover something astonishing. You were never broken. You were simply disconnected. Disconnected from your truth, from your boundaries, from your values, from your self-worth. And now, piece by piece, you are reconnecting. You are becoming someone you can rely on, someone you can respect, someone you feel safe with. You are becoming your own home, not a temporary shelter, not a fragile refuge, but a grounded, steady, peaceful place where your soul can rest without fear of attack from your own mind. And when you reach this point, you realize something life-changing. You no longer need the world to constantly reassure you, because you have finally learned how to reassure yourself. And that is the beginning of true inner freedom. Chapter 4. Clearing the weight you no longer need. There comes a stage in your journey where growth no longer means adding more into your life. It means releasing what you were never meant to carry. Because without realizing it, you've been walking through life with emotional stones in your pockets. Old memories, old identities, old expectations, old guilt, old fears, old versions of yourself that should have been allowed to rest, but were kept alive through repetition. You wake up, and your heart feels heavy, not because of the present moment, but because you've been dragging the past with you everywhere you go. And you whisper silently, "I'm tired." Not tired from effort, not tired from work, but tired from emotional weight that never leaves. And slowly, you begin to understand something sacred. You cannot move forward freely while your hands are still holding on to what hurts you. So, Chapter 4 is about clearing that weight, not running from it, not denying it, not burying it deeper, but acknowledging it, honoring it, releasing it, and finally learning how to walk again, lighter, calmer, whole. It starts with awareness. You begin to notice the patterns that suffocate your peace, the way certain memories replay like a loop, as if your mind refuses to let the moment end, the way old wounds resurface inside your chest, even when the person who caused them is no longer near you. The way you hold yourself responsible for things you did not know, could not understand, were not prepared for at the time. You begin to see all the emotional contracts you signed without realizing. I must be strong for everyone. I must never make mistakes. I must stay silent to be accepted. I must hold everything together. I must carry pain quietly. And slowly, you begin to ask, who told me I had to live this way? Who told you that your worth depended on suffering? Who told you that love meant losing yourself? Who told you that silence made you good? Who told you that peace required self-betrayal? Who told you that loyalty meant staying where you were, slowly dying inside? Some of those beliefs came from childhood, some from culture, some from people who were also wounded and unknowingly passed their pain forward. But now, you are aware, and awareness is the beginning of freedom. You begin to understand that growth is not just about what you do with your life. It is about what you are willing to let go of. Letting go of guilt that was never yours to carry. Letting go of shame that does not belong to you. Letting go of blame that chains you to an old scene in your memory. Letting go of anger that keeps your heart in a constant storm. Letting go of expectations that suffocate your spirit. And letting go is not forgetting. It is not pretending nothing happened. It is not erasing your story. It is not deleting the lessons. Letting go simply means you stop reopening the wound. You stop rehearsing the pain. You stop building your identity around what hurt you. You stop allowing the past to write the present moment. You finally say, "This happened. It shaped me, but it will not define me anymore." You gently begin to put down the suitcase of emotional weight you've been dragging. You put down the anger you used as armor, because you no longer need to defend a wound that has already healed. You put down the self-hatred that grew out of other people's mistreatment, because you finally see that how they treated you was a reflection of them, not you. You put down the fear of being misunderstood, because you know your truth, and your truth does not need loud explanation to be real. You put down the need to always be strong, because even strength needs a place to rest. And as each burden slips from your grasp, your soul exhales for the first time in years. You begin to feel something unfamiliar, lightness. The kind of lightness that doesn't mean emptiness, but wholeness. Because weightless doesn't mean you have nothing. It means you're finally carrying only what belongs to you. And with this lightness comes clarity. You begin to see relationships differently. You begin to understand that not everyone who walked with you was meant to stay for the entire journey. Some people were lessons. Some were mirrors. Some were chapters, not the whole book. Some loved you as deeply as they were able, but their ability to love was shaped by their own wounds. And for the first time, instead of clinging, you allow people to exist where they truly belong, not where your loneliness wants them to be. You stop forcing connections. You stop shrinking yourself to fit. You stop begging for presents from those who are halfway gone. You choose peace over closeness that hurts. You choose self-respect over attention that confuses. You choose solitude over company that costs you your soul. Because now, you know, losing yourself is too expensive, and you're done paying that price. But clearing weight is not just about people. It's about habits that numb you, patterns that trap you, stories you keep telling yourself that no longer serve your growth. You begin to question, why do I distract myself whenever discomfort comes? Why do I run the moment commitment appears? Why do I feel unworthy of good things? Why do I sabotage my own progress? Why do I fear calmness as if chaos is safer? And slowly, gently, patiently, you begin untangling these knots. You realize that some of your habits were not built from joy. They were built from survival. You didn't procrastinate because you were lazy. You delayed because you feared failing. You didn't overthink because you loved thinking. You overthought because your nervous system was searching for safety. You didn't tolerate mistreatment because you lacked self-respect. You tolerated it because you were taught that love meant endurance. And when you see this truth, compassion replaces condemnation. You no longer attack yourself for your patterns. You understand them, and therefore, you can finally heal them. You begin making different choices. You choose presence over escape. You choose truth over self-protection lies. You choose boundaries over silent resentment. You choose stillness over chaos. You choose intentional living over drifting on autopilot. And each choice becomes a thread in a new identity you are weaving, patiently, deliberately, lovingly. But there is another layer to clearing weight. You must release the future you thought you had to live, the timeline you compared yourself to, the expectations you measured yourself against, the silent checklist you judged your worth with. You realize life didn't delay you. Life shaped you. Life prepared you. Life protected you from paths that were never meant for your soul. And, slowly, your heart surrenders the idea that everything should already be perfect. You discover the beauty of becoming, not forcing. You begin to trust the unfolding of your life, instead of fighting it. You begin to walk gently, instead of desperately. You begin to breathe again, without feeling like you're always behind. And with every breath, the past loosens its grip, not because it disappeared, but because you no longer live inside it. You live here, in this moment, in this chapter, in this becoming. And this present moment feels safe for the first time in a long time. Your body softens, your shoulders drop, your mind slows, your soul rests, because the war inside you is finally ending. You are no longer fighting your story. You are integrating it, honoring it, growing from it. You realize everything you went through did not break you. It built you. It carved depth into your heart. It carved wisdom into your mind. It carved compassion into your spirit. It shaped a strength that is quiet, but unshakable. A strength that doesn't scream, doesn't posture, doesn't need to be seen. A strength that simply exists. And this strength carries you forward, calmly, steadily, gratefully, because you have finally placed the past where it belongs, behind you, as a teacher, not a prison. And now, you walk lighter, you think clearer, you feel deeper, you exist more fully in your own life, because you are finally carrying only what your soul was meant to hold: peace, presence, self-respect, integrity, love that doesn't cost you yourself, a future that unfolds without force, a heart that knows how to release what hurts so it can embrace what heals. And this is the essence of clearing the weight you no longer need. It is an act of self-honoring, a declaration of inner freedom, a gentle whisper to your soul. You are safe now. You are allowed to put it down. You are allowed to be light again. And as you continue this journey forward, step by step, moment by moment, you will realize something priceless. You did not lose anything. By letting go, you finally gained yourself. And that is the greatest gain a human being can ever receive. Chapter 5. Becoming the person you trust. There is a moment on your journey where you begin to realize something profound. It is not the world you stopped trusting. It is yourself. You stopped trusting your ability to choose wisely. You stopped trusting your own voice. You stopped trusting your intuition. You stopped trusting your strength. You stopped trusting that you could build, commit, stay consistent, rise, grow, or begin again without collapsing back into old cycles. And that silent loss of self-trust changed the way you walked through the world. You hesitated more. You avoided more. You delayed more. You questioned yourself more. You agreed to things you didn't want. You blamed circumstances instead of reclaiming your power. And, deep inside, you carried a quiet fear. What if I can't trust myself not to fall again? But here's the truth. Your heart is finally ready to hear. Self-trust is not something you are born with. It is something you rebuild. Carefully, patiently, deliberately, like a bridge that once collapsed, but is now being reconstructed with stronger materials, wiser engineering, and a deeper understanding of what is needed to hold real weight. So, Chapter 5 is about becoming the person you trust again, the version of you who keeps their word, who follows through, who honors their boundaries, who stands up for their heart, who moves with integrity even when nobody is watching, who does not abandon themselves when pressure rises. Because when you trust yourself, you walk differently, you breathe differently, you speak differently. You love differently. You choose differently. You live differently. Your life no longer becomes a reaction to everything around you. It becomes a creation that flows from inside you, and that changes everything. It begins with small promises. Self-trust does not return through big declarations. It returns through small, quiet promises, kept consistently. Not, I will change everything overnight. But I will do one honest thing today that aligns with who I am becoming. Something simple, something grounded, something real. You drink water when you said you would. You rest when you said you needed to. You show up for your work not perfectly but sincerely. You put down your phone when you said you would. You speak gently to yourself when your mind tries to spiral. You walk away from what you know is wrong for you, even when it still tempts you. And each time you follow through, something powerful happens inside you. Your mind whispers, maybe I can rely on myself again. And this whisper slowly grows stronger. Self-trust does not return through pressure. It returns through reliability. You don't force yourself to be perfect. You simply refuse to betray yourself anymore. You learn to listen to yourself. There was a time you heard your inner voice clearly and chose to ignore it. You felt the red flags. You sensed your body tighten. You heard the quiet whisper saying, "This is not for you. This is not safe. This is not aligned. This is not love. This is not your path." But you overrode that voice. To keep the peace, to avoid discomfort, to feel wanted, to feel secure, to avoid being alone, to convince yourself it would change. And when it didn't, you didn't just lose trust in others, you lost trust in yourself. So now, you begin listening again. Not to fear, not to insecurity, not to impulsive thoughts, but to that deep inner wisdom that lives beneath the noise, the wisdom that always knew. You listen to how your body reacts, how your spirit feels, how your chest tightens or relaxes, how your soul responds, because the body never lies. And, with each aligned decision, your self-trust strengthens. You begin to believe yourself again. You learn to protect your boundaries. Self-trust is built through boundaries. Not boundaries against the world, but boundaries that protect your inner world. You begin saying, no, without guilt. You begin saying, that's not for me, without fear. You begin saying, I won't allow myself to be treated this way, with calm clarity, because you finally understand. Every time you allow disrespect, self-betrayal occurs. Every time you ignore your needs, self-abandonment grows. Every time you silence your truth, self-trust weakens. So now, you choose yourself first, not because you lack love for others, but because you finally include yourself in the circle of people you must care for. And this shift changes your energy completely, because a person who trusts themselves no longer seeks permission to exist as they are. They stand, not arrogantly, not aggressively, but firmly, softly, calmly, rooted. And the world begins to respond differently to someone who carries their spirit, like something sacred. You learn that consistency is love. There is a kind of love that is louder than words. Consistency. Someone can say, they care, they value, they promise, they will change. But only consistency proves truth. The same applies within you. Self-love, self-respect, self-trust are not feelings. They are behaviors. They are the way you show up when it would be easier not to. They are the way you refuse to run when discomfort appears. They are the way you commit to your growth, even when the results are not instant. You begin to understand. Consistency is not about intensity. It is about loyalty. Loyalty to your future. Loyalty to your standards. Loyalty to your peace. Loyalty to your path. Loyalty to your truth. And the more loyal you become to your own evolution, the more self-trust becomes your natural state. You learn to sit with discomfort. A lot of self-betrayal happens here, not because you're weak, but because you didn't yet understand. That discomfort isn't danger. Your nervous system learned. That discomfort meant fear, rejection, abandonment, loss, or humiliation. So, when discomfort appeared, you avoided, you escaped, you shut down, you delayed. You said, I'll do it later. You chose temporary relief over long-term alignment. But now, you begin to train a new response. You sit with discomfort. You breathe through it. You watch it rise and fall like a wave. And you realize discomfort isn't here to destroy you. It's here to rebuild you. Every time you stay present with discomfort, your self-trust expands. Because you prove to yourself, I don't abandon myself when things become hard. And that is one of the strongest forms of inner safety you will ever experience. You learn to be your own safe place most of your life. You searched for safety outside of yourself, in relationships, in attention, in validation, in routines, in control. You wanted someone or something to hold your heart gently so you wouldn't have to. But now you begin becoming your own safe place. Safe, not because life is predictable, but because you no longer judge yourself for being human. You allow yourself to feel without shame. You allow yourself to rest without guilt. You allow yourself to speak truth without fear. You allow yourself to grow without apology. And that safety softens your inner world. Your nervous system relaxes. Your breathing deepens. Your mind stops fighting itself. You are finally on your own side. And there is nothing more stabilizing than that. You learn to forgive yourself fully. Self-trust cannot exist while self-punishment remains. So you begin the slow process of forgiving yourself. You release the constant self-criticism. You release the old labels. You release the shame that clings like smoke. You release the belief that you must suffer to prove you've learned. You begin speaking to yourself like someone you love. You begin treating your past like a teacher and not a prison. You allow yourself to be human, flawed, growing, expanding, evolving. And with each act of compassion, your self-trust deepens, because now you know you will not destroy yourself. When you fall, you will hold yourself. And in that holding, you rise. You learn to move with integrity. Self-trust thrives where integrity lives. Integrity is alignment between your words, your actions, your values, your energy, your inner world. No more pretending. No more shaping yourself to fit. No more agreeing to what harms you. No more smiling through self-betrayal. No more dishonesty with yourself. You begin to say, if it is not true for me, I will not live it. And that clarity simplifies life. You no longer wrestle internally with who you are versus who you present. You simply are, honest, grounded, aligned. And this alignment is where self-trust blooms completely, because you no longer split yourself into fragments. You become whole. And one day, you realize something beautiful. Without a dramatic moment, self-trust has quietly returned. You notice it in small ways first. The way your mind feels steady instead of chaotic. The way your decisions feel grounded instead of panicked. The way you stop chasing things that aren't meant for you. The way you walk away when respect leaves the room. The way you no longer explain yourself to people who don't listen. The way you choose growth over stagnation. The way you choose peace over familiarity. The way you protect your heart without hardening it. You look at yourself, and for the first time in a long time, you feel safe inside your own life. Safe to grow, safe to move forward, safe to choose yourself, safe to love again wisely, safe to dream without self-sabotage, safe to exist fully. You did not become perfect. You became trustworthy, and that matters far more, because when you trust yourself, you do not fear the future. You know, no matter what happens, you will not abandon yourself again, and that realization is the foundation of an unshakable life. Chapter 6. Learning to walk through life with peace. There comes a point in your journey when you begin to understand something subtle, something powerful, something life-changing. Peace is not something you find outside of yourself. Peace is something you learn to live from. For so long, you believed peace would arrive when your life finally arranged itself into a perfect pattern. When every problem dissolved, when every wound healed, when every door opened, when every uncertainty disappeared, when everything made sense. So you kept waiting for peace to appear, like a sunrise after a long night. But slowly, through experience, through reflection, through quiet awareness, you begin to realize peace does not come from life becoming easier. Peace comes from you becoming steadier. It comes from the way you respond to life. not from how life behaves. And this realization opens a new chapter within you, a chapter where you no longer chase calmness. You become calmness. You no longer chase reassurance. You become reassurance. You no longer chase safety. You become your own safe place. And because of that, everything begins to change. Not dramatically, not loudly, but gently, quietly, deeply, like a river that has found its true path. You begin to understand your inner weather. Inside you, there is a sky, and your thoughts, your emotions, your moods, they are the weather. Sometimes the sky is clear. Sometimes it is cloudy. Sometimes it storms. Sometimes it is still. For much of your life, you believed you were the storm. You believed you were your thoughts. You believed you were your emotions. You believed you were your anxiety, your sadness, your fear, your uncertainty. But slowly, you begin to notice something profound. You are not the storm. You are the sky. The storm passes through you, but it is not you. The clouds drift across you, but they cannot stay forever. The weather changes, but the sky remains. This awareness becomes one of the greatest sources of peace you will ever discover, because you no longer panic every time a difficult feeling appears. You no longer fear your own emotions. You simply observe them, allowing them to exist, without letting them define you. You learn to say, "This too belongs to the human experience. This too will pass. This too is part of growth." And in that simple acceptance, pain loses its power to control you, because suffering is often not the emotion itself. It is the resistance to the emotion. When you fight what you feel, you create tension. But when you allow yourself to feel, you create space. And in that space, peace quietly enters. You begin to respond instead of react. One of the clearest signs that inner peace is growing within you is the way your reactions change. There was a time when every word pierced you, every slight triggered you, every uncertainty overwhelmed you, every delay frustrated you, every challenge shook you. You reacted quickly, emotionally, desperately, not because you lacked strength, but because your nervous system was always braced for impact. You lived on edge. But now, you pause, you breathe, you allow yourself a moment of awareness before you respond. This pause, this sacred gap between stimulus and response, is where your true power lives. In that gap, you choose your values instead of your wounds. You choose your wisdom instead of your impulse. You choose your growth instead of your triggers. You begin to realize you are not obligated to attend every argument you are invited into. You are not required to fix every misunderstanding. You are not responsible for every opinion others hold of you. You are not meant to bleed for what does not honor your heart. And this clarity softens your life. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop arguing with those who do not listen. You stop defending your worth. You stop begging to be seen. You conserve your energy, not from fear, but from wisdom. And wisdom feels peaceful. You learn to stay present. Much of your suffering came from two places: the past and the future. The past held your pain, your regrets, your guilt, your mistakes, your what-ifs, your "I should have known betters," your memories that never fully faded. The future held your fear, your anxiety, your uncertainty, your overthinking, your imagined disasters, your desperate need for control. And somewhere in between was the present moment, where life was quietly happening, but you were rarely there. So now, you begin practicing something gentle but powerful: presence. You anchor your awareness into what is real, right here, your breath, your surroundings, your senses, your body, your thoughts observed without judgment, your emotions felt without suppression. And while the past may visit and the future may call, you always return to this moment, because peace only lives here, not back then, not later. Here, you begin to notice the little things you once rushed past, the softness in the air, the warmth of light, the stillness inside stillness, the way silence feels like a friend, not a threat. You also notice yourself, how you truly feel, how your heart truly moves, how your spirit truly responds. And this self-awareness grounds you like an anchor in the sea of life. You learn that silence is not emptiness. There was a time when silence felt uncomfortable. You filled it with noise, music, voices, conversations, screens, movement, anything but stillness. Because silence meant facing yourself, and facing yourself meant facing everything you had been avoiding. But now, silence becomes something else. Silence becomes medicine. Silence becomes the space where your soul breathes, where your thoughts settle, where clarity rises gently like dawn, where your intuition speaks softly, without shouting, without forcing. You begin to spend time alone, not because you are hiding, but because you are listening. And what you hear is not emptiness, but truth. You begin to understand your needs, your boundaries, your desires, your values, your patterns, your reactions, your healing. You see yourself more clearly, and the clearer you see yourself, the less you tolerate what does not align with your inner world. This is peace, not as an escape, but as a state of being. You learn to release what you cannot control. A huge part of your suffering came from trying to hold tightly to what was never yours to control. You tried to control how others felt, how they behaved, how they loved, how they showed up, how they stayed, how they changed. You tried to control every outcome, every timeline, every possibility, every unseen moment of the future. You tried to control how you were perceived, how you were remembered, how you were understood. And in this constant effort to control, you exhausted your soul. But now you begin to release, not recklessly, not carelessly, not by abandoning responsibility, but by understanding control was an illusion. You can choose your actions, but not their outcomes. You can open your heart, but not force another to hold it correctly. You can prepare wisely, but not guarantee certainty. You can do your best and still surrender the rest. This surrender is not weakness. It is trust. Trust in your resilience. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in your inner strength. Trust that what is meant to grow with you will never require you to betray yourself to keep it. And this trust brings peace, because you no longer fight the river of life. You learn to float with awareness, with intention, with grace. You learn to let life breathe. Peace teaches you something beautiful. You do not need to force everything. Not love, not success, not friendships, not timing, not healing, not purpose, not outcomes. What is meant for you does not require self-destruction to maintain. You begin to soften your grip. You begin to allow space. You begin to trust unfolding. And this does not mean you stop striving. It means your striving becomes healthy. It comes from inspiration, not desperation. It comes from alignment, not fear. It comes from clarity, not chaos. Your energy shifts from, "I must make this happen," or I will crumble, to I will do my part, and I will let life meet me halfway. And in that balance, peace settles into your bones. You learn to live with gentle standards. Peace is not passivity. It does not mean you accept anything. It does not mean you shrink. It does not mean you tolerate disrespect. It does not mean you disconnect from life. Peace actually sharpens your standards, because once you taste inner calmness, you refuse to return to emotional chaos. You refuse to sit where your soul feels small. You refuse to explain your value. You refuse to chase love through self-abandonment. You refuse to argue with people who enjoy conflict. You refuse to sacrifice your peace just to be included. Your standards become silent. They do not require announcements. They simply exist in your presence. And your presence begins to feel different, grounded, soft, powerful, calm, aware, unmoved by noise. People feel it, even if they cannot explain it, because peace has a frequency, and you now live within it. You learn to accept life as a teacher. Inner peace deepens when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this here to teach me?" Life becomes less of a battlefield and more of a classroom. You stop taking everything personally. You stop labeling every difficult moment as punishment. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of life. And instead, you become a student of life. You begin to see patterns, themes, lessons, growth points, healing invitations, awareness triggers. You begin to understand that not everything that hurts you is here to break you. Some experiences arrive to show you where you need boundaries, where you need courage, where you need healing, where you need honesty, where you need self-respect, where you need to let go. And when you accept this, the edge softens. Pain may still appear, but suffering loses its dominance, because now you grow through what you go through, and growth is peaceful. You learn. That peace lives inside your choices. Peace is not random. It is built through choices, daily, quietly, intentionally. You choose what you consume. You choose where your energy goes. You choose who you allow close. You choose the tone of your inner voice. You choose presence over escape. You choose boundaries over resentment. You choose honesty over pretending. You choose self-respect over approval. You choose stillness over chaos. You choose reflection over reaction. And these choices become a pattern. This pattern becomes a lifestyle. And this lifestyle becomes peace. You realize your life doesn't transform because one big thing changed. It transforms because you repeatedly chose what your soul needed over what your habits craved. And that is true strength. Quiet, steady, powerful, gentle, enduring. And eventually, something beautiful happens. One day, in an ordinary moment, you notice something new. Your mind feels quieter. Your chest feels lighter. Your thoughts feel softer. Your heart feels steady. Your breath flows easily. You realize the storms still come, but they do not own you anymore. The waves still rise, but you no longer drown. The noise still exists, but your inner world remains calm. You are no longer constantly at war with yourself. You are no longer running from your own reflection. You are no longer begging the world to give you what you were always meant to nurture inside. You have become a person who walks through life with peace, not because life became perfect, but because you learned how to remain whole inside an imperfect world. And that is one of the deepest forms of freedom. you will ever experience. Chapter 7. Rising into the life that was always waiting for you. There comes a moment in your journey when everything begins to shift, not because the world suddenly changes, but because you finally have. For so long, life felt like something happening to you. You were reacting, adjusting, surviving, drifting between moments, trying to hold yourself together, while silently wondering if there was ever going to be more than this. But now, after walking through honesty, after rebuilding trust with yourself, after releasing what weighed you down, after discovering inner peace, you begin to sense something profound rising within you. Not excitement, not adrenaline, not temporary motivation. Something deeper, something steadier, something grounded. A quiet realization that says, I am finally becoming the person I was always meant to be. Not the version shaped by fear, not the version shaped by past wounds, not the version shaped by expectations, not the version shaped by survival, but the version shaped by alignment, awareness, truth, and self-respect. And as this realization anchors itself inside you, your entire way of existing in the world begins to transform, quietly, naturally, gracefully, like a dawn that does not ask permission before it appears. You begin to move from purpose rather than pressure. There was a time when your life felt like an endless list of obligations. You lived with a constant sense of urgency, as if something terrible would happen if you ever stopped pushing. You worked, not out of love, but out of fear of falling behind. You stayed in situations, not out of alignment, but out of fear of losing stability. You agreed to things, not out of truth, but out of fear of disappointing others. Pressure was your fuel. Anxiety was your motivator. Expectation was your compass. But now, you begin to move differently. You begin to choose work that nourishes your mind, instead of draining your spirit. You begin to create from inspiration, instead of desperation. You begin to act from clarity, instead of panic. You begin to realize that purpose is quiet. It doesn't chase. It doesn't scream. It doesn't compete. It simply aligns. And when you move from alignment, life begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a journey. You are consciously choosing to walk. You begin to outgrow versions of yourself you once lived inside. Growth is rarely loud. Sometimes it looks like choosing to respond with grace instead of defensiveness. Sometimes it looks like walking away from arguments that only exist to keep you small. Sometimes it looks like saying no calmly without explaining your reason 100 different ways. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone on a quiet night, reflecting on your life, instead of drowning your thoughts in noise. And sometimes growth looks like grieving the versions of you that once protected you but can no longer guide you forward. The version of you who tolerated too much. The version of you who pretended everything was fine. The version of you who abandoned themselves for love. The version of you who didn't yet know how to choose peace. The version of you who had to survive, even when survival meant losing parts of your soul. You don't judge those versions. You thank them, because they were doing the best they could, with the awareness they had. But you also gently release them, because you are ready to live differently now. You are ready to stop existing in survival mode and begin existing in creation mode. You begin to accept that not everyone will rise with you. One of the most difficult parts of growth is realizing that your elevation will gently separate you from people who remain attached to the versions of you no longer are. Some people only understood you when you were doubting yourself. Some people only felt comfortable when your boundaries were soft. Some people only loved you when you ignored your needs. Some people only stayed because you carried more of the emotional weight than you should have. When you begin to rise in self-respect, the dynamics change. You no longer over-explain. You no longer people-please. You no longer shrink to be digestible. You no longer silence your truth to preserve false peace. You now carry yourself with quiet dignity. And dignity is not always comfortable for those who benefited from your lack of it. So, some will drift. Some will distance. Some will misunderstand. Some will say you changed, and they will be right. You did change. But the change you made was not arrogance. It was alignment. And alignment is not for everyone. So instead of chasing those who no longer fit your journey, you bless them, and you continue walking. Because peace has taught you that holding on to what hurts your spirit is not love. It is self-abandonment. And you are done abandoning yourself. You begin to live with intention instead of habit. You start paying attention to the way you spend your moments. You no longer drift unconsciously through your days. You begin asking yourself, does this nourish my soul? Does this align with who I am becoming? Is this draining my life or feeding it? Am I moving from fear or from truth? You become intentional about what you consume, who you listen to, where your energy goes, because you finally understand everything you give your attention to is shaping you. Thoughts shape you. People shape you. Habits shape you. Conversations shape you. Silence shapes you. What you repeat daily carves your identity, like water carving stone. So you begin choosing differently. You choose depth over distraction. You choose stillness over overstimulation. You choose relationships where your nervous system relaxes. Instead of bracing for emotional impact, you choose environments where your authenticity feels safe. And life begins to respond, not instantly, not magically, but naturally. Because intention realigns reality, you begin to respect your energy as something sacred. There was a time when you believed your energy was unlimited. You gave endlessly. You fixed endlessly. You listened endlessly. You poured endlessly, even when your own soul was running on empty. But now, you understand that your energy is a sacred resource. You begin to honor your limits, not as weakness, but as wisdom. You rest without guilt. You step away without fear. You heal without apology. You say no without shame. And you surround yourself with people who do not demand that you bleed to prove your love. Your energy becomes intentional, warm but not draining, giving but not self-sacrificing, open but not unprotected, loving but no longer self-abandoning. This balance creates a new kind of inner stability, because you finally realize you do not need to burn yourself down to keep others warm. You begin to see yourself clearly for the first time. Self-awareness deepens. You begin to see your true nature, your kindness, your depth, your intuition, your strength, your sensitivity, your intelligence, your compassion, your fire, your softness, your resilience. You begin to notice that you have always been far more capable than you ever believed. And the only thing that ever truly limited you was the story you told yourself about who you were allowed to be. So, you rewrite the story, not with ego, with truth. You no longer define yourself by your past moments of pain. You no longer see yourself through the lens of old mistakes. You no longer treat your life as something broken. You begin to recognize yourself as a whole being who has walked bravely through life, carrying more than most people ever saw. And this recognition is healing, because when you finally see your worth, you stop negotiating it. You begin to allow joy back into your life. Sometimes, when you have carried pain for too long, joy feels uncomfortable, happiness feels suspicious, calm feels unsafe, good things feel temporary. You wait for the fall. You wait for the mistake. You wait for the loss. You wait for the pain, because your nervous system has been conditioned to expect difficulty. But now you begin gently retraining your heart to receive joy again. Slowly, softly, tenderly, you allow yourself to laugh. You allow yourself to smile. You allow yourself to feel proud. You allow yourself to enjoy your life without guilt. You realize you do not always need to be healing. You do not always need to be working on yourself. You do not always need to be processing something heavy. You are allowed to exist. You are allowed to feel light. You are allowed to rest inside moments of beauty without questioning whether you deserve them. And this return to joy reawakens parts of you that went quiet long ago. The playful parts, the creative parts, the curious parts, the childlike parts that still remember how to wonder. Joy begins to flow through your life again, not as a distraction, but as a natural expression of a heart that finally feels safe. You begin to walk with quiet confidence. Confidence is no longer a performance. You do not need to prove your worth. You do not need to announce your growth. You do not need to be loud, to be powerful. Your confidence is gentle, grounded, unshakable. It does not rely on attention. It does not rely on external validation. It does not rely on comparison. It lives within you, in the way you speak kindly to yourself, in the way you hold your boundaries, in the way you walk away when something is wrong, in the way you choose truth. Even when truth is uncomfortable, you no longer shrink to make others feel comfortable. You no longer dim yourself to belong. You no longer pretend to be small, to avoid being noticed. You simply are, fully, calmly, softly, completely, and that fullness radiates from you without effort. You begin to realize you are free, not free from life, free within life, free from the inner war, free from constant self-doubt, free from needing permission to exist, free from chasing what hurts you, free from living on repeat, free to choose, free to grow, free to rest, free to leave, free to begin again, free to become. And in that freedom, your life does not become perfect, but it becomes yours, truly yours. Not built from fear, not built from survival, not built from pressure, but built from intention, from authenticity, from courage, from compassion, from peace. And this realization is not loud, it is quiet, sacred, private, a knowing that you are exactly where you need to be to continue becoming who you were always meant to become. And one day, you look back at the person you once were, the one who doubted, the one who feared, the one who felt lost, the one who carried too much, the one who didn't yet know how to choose themselves. And you feel nothing but compassion, because you now understand how much courage it took for that version of you to keep going, even when the weight felt unbearable, even when the nights felt endless, even when the path ahead was invisible. You do not judge them. You honor them, because without their endurance, you would not be here now, standing in your truth, rooted in peace, aligned with growth, becoming daily someone you genuinely respect, and you whisper inwardly, "Thank you for surviving until I learned how to live." This is what it means to rise. Rising isn't always dramatic. Sometimes rising is simply answering your own needs, loving yourself honestly, forgiving what you cannot change, accepting what is real, letting go of what is gone, trusting your journey, returning to your heart, choosing peace again and again, even when chaos calls your name. You are not rising above life. You are rising into life, into presence, into authenticity, into alignment, into self-trust, into emotional maturity, into grounded strength, into compassionate power. And the journey is not over. It is unfolding, beautifully, patiently, naturally, one breath at a time, one choice at a time, one quiet breakthrough at a time. And as you continue walking forward, you carry with you the deepest truth of all. You were never meant to merely survive your life. You were meant to grow through it, rise within it, and live it fully from the inside out. And now, you finally are. Chapter 8. Discovering the path that was always yours. At some point along your inner journey, you begin to realize something quietly extraordinary. Your life was never meant to be a random sequence of events. There has always been a pattern, a direction, a deep undercurrent guiding you towards something that feels like home. Not a physical place, not a person, not a destination you can point to on a map, but a state of being, a way of living that feels aligned, authentic, true. For most of your life, you searched for this feeling outside yourself. You believed purpose was something you had to chase, something you had to prove yourself worthy of, something far away reserved for people more talented, more confident, more certain than you. But over time, after everything you've walked through, after every silent awakening, after every lesson that reshaped your heart, you begin to understand the truth. Purpose was never somewhere out there. Purpose was always within you, waiting to be remembered. And the journey you've taken so far has simply been guiding you home, to yourself. You begin to listen to the quiet calling within you. Inside you, there has always been a whisper, a soft voice, a subtle pull, a longing that never fully left. Even when you ignored it, even when life became noisy, even when fear tried to silence it, it showed itself in your curiosity, in what moved you emotionally, in what you admired in others, in what angered your sense of justice, in what felt meaningful, even when it made no logical sense. But for a long time, you dismissed it. You told yourself, "It's unrealistic. It's too late. I'm not ready. I don't know enough. Other people are better than me. What if I fail? What will they think?" So you stayed where it felt safe, predictable, familiar. Yet deep down, the longing remained, a quiet tug at the soul that whispered, something more lives within you, something beautiful, something meant to be expressed, something the world can only receive through you. And now, because you have softened, because you have become honest, because you have learned peace, because you have rebuilt trust with yourself, you are finally ready to listen, not with fear, with openness, with gentleness, with curiosity. You don't force the answer. You don't demand clarity. You simply create space for your truth to rise. And slowly, like a dawn revealing itself across the horizon, it begins to. You begin to realize that purpose is not a job, it is a way of living. You were once trapped in the belief that purpose had to be something grand, a title, a career, an achievement, a goal that sparkled from a distance. But now, you begin to understand something deeper. Purpose is not what you do. Purpose is how you live. It is the energy you bring to the world, the way you treat people, the way you nurture yourself, the way you move through life with awareness instead of autopilot. Purpose is present when you show kindness without expecting anything in return. Purpose is present when you create something that reflects your inner world. Purpose is present when you speak truth instead of hiding behind silence. Purpose is present when you grow, even when growth requires letting go. Purpose is present when your actions align with your values. And when you begin to live in alignment, everything you do becomes touched with meaning, even the smallest moments. A conversation, a quiet walk, a written sentence, a decision to rest, a boundary set with love, a step taken towards something new. Purpose lives there, not because the moment is grand, but because you are fully present within it. You begin to understand that your path is not supposed to look like anyone else's. Comparison once imprisoned you. You looked at others and believed, they are ahead, they are more successful, they are happier, they are stronger, they are where I should be by now. And so you tried to shape your life into someone else's design. But the more you did that, the further you drifted away from your own truth, until one day you realized something freeing. You were never meant to live their story. Your journey is uniquely yours. Your timing, your lessons, your breakthroughs, your healing, your unfolding, everything you've walked through, the highs, the lows, the moments that brought you to your knees, the moments that rebuilt you, all of it has been shaping you for the path that only you can walk. And when you finally accept this, comparison dissolves. You stop racing people who are not even headed to the same destination as you. You begin honoring your pace. You begin trusting your direction. You begin loving your story for what it has revealed within you. And that acceptance brings peace into your purpose. You begin to follow what feels true, not just what looks right. For much of your life, you were guided by what looked right to others, what would sound impressive, what would be accepted, what would feel safe, what would avoid judgment. But now, you begin to ask a different question. What feels true? Not what feels easy, not what feels comfortable, not what feels familiar, but what feels aligned with your deepest values, your inner nature, your authentic self. Sometimes what feels true does not please everyone. Sometimes what feels true requires you to risk being misunderstood. Sometimes what feels true asks you to leave behind paths you once thought were permanent. But with each true step, you feel more alive. Your spirit expands. Your chest feels lighter. Your mind feels clearer. Because your soul recognizes truth, the way a seed recognizes sunlight, and it leans toward it instinctively. You begin to understand that meaning is built, not found. Meaning does not fall into your lap like a gift wrapped by the universe. Meaning is constructed with attention, energy, heart, and presence. A relationship becomes meaningful when you show up with honesty and care. Your work becomes meaningful when you pour intention and integrity into it. Your days become meaningful when you stop sleepwalking through them and begin to fully experience them. Purpose grows the way a tree grows. Roots first invisible to the world, deep within your inner life. Then slowly, branches emerge. Expression, creation, contribution, connection, service, impact. But without roots, branches cannot last. So you keep nurturing your roots, your self-awareness, your healing, your peace, your emotional maturity, your integrity, your patience, your presence. And the stronger your roots become, the more naturally your life bears fruit. You begin to offer the world what only you can give. There is something inside you that only you can offer the world. It may not be loud, it may not be flashy, it may not be recognized by everyone, but it is yours. Your perspective, your story, your compassion, your creativity, your humor, your strength, your healing, your voice, your insight, your light. And when you begin to live in alignment, this gift starts to flow through you, without forcing, without pretending, without trying to be someone else. It becomes natural, like breathing, and those who are meant to receive it will, not because you chased them, but because truth naturally calls to what is meant to find it. You begin to live with a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude is not pretending everything is perfect. It is acknowledging that even within imperfection, there is still beauty, there is still growth, there is still grace, there is still meaning. You begin to say thank you for the lessons, for the strength you discovered, for the moments of joy, for the moments of clarity, for the people who stayed, for the people who left because they taught you boundaries, for the doors that opened, for the doors that closed because they redirected you, for the storms that shaped you, for the sunlight that warmed you. Gratitude becomes a lens through which you view your life. And this lens reveals abundance in places you once overlooked. Your heart softens, your spirit expands, your life begins to feel more full, more rich, more alive, because gratitude connects you to the present moment in the deepest way, and where presence exists, purpose breathes. You begin to realize that you are already walking your path. Purpose is not a future point you eventually reach. It is woven into every conscious step you take, right now, right here, in your decision to heal, in your willingness to grow, in your courage to choose yourself, in your commitment to peace, in your honesty with your heart, in your presence within your own life. You are not on your way to your path. You are already on it. And the more you honor that truth, the more aligned your life becomes. Not perfect, not without challenge, but deeply meaningful, deeply real, deeply yours. And one day, you finally understand. Purpose is not a job, not an achievement, not a title, not a destination. Purpose is the way your soul moves through the world when it is no longer afraid to be itself. And now, you are learning to live that way, fully, calmly, courageously, softly, honestly, from the inside out. And as you continue walking forward, beautifully aligned with your truth, you will realize something sacred. The life you were always searching for was quietly waiting within you all along. And now you have finally returned home. Chapter 9. When transformation becomes who you are, there comes a sacred point in your journey where growth is no longer something you are trying to maintain. It simply becomes your nature. You are no longer pretending to be calm. You are no longer forcing discipline. You are no longer acting confident. You are no longer borrowing strength from motivation. You have become the very qualities you once struggled so desperately to practice. The shift is subtle at first. You don't wake up one morning to applause or grand realization. There is no dramatic moment, no spotlight, no announcement. Instead, it reveals itself in ordinary moments, quiet moments, moments where the old you would have broken, but the new you remains steady, You notice it in your reactions. One day, something doesn't go your way. The plan changes. Someone disappoints you. A door closes unexpectedly. A wave of uncertainty arrives. The old you would have panicked, overthought, collapsed inward, questioned your worth, searched for someone to blame, including yourself. But now, you pause, you breathe, you observe, you respond instead of react. There is space between the event and your emotion. And in that space lies your wisdom. You no longer demand that life behave perfectly in order for you to feel safe, because safety now lives inside you. And this realization settles within you, like a calm sunrise over still water. You notice it in your boundaries. There was a time when the word no felt heavy in your mouth. You feared rejection. You feared conflict. You feared loss. You feared being misunderstood. So you said yes, even when your soul was screaming no. But now, you say no, softly, calmly, clearly, without apology. You do not harden your heart to do it. You do not raise your voice. You do not explain yourself endlessly. You simply honor your limits, because you finally understand that self-respect is not a luxury, it is emotional oxygen. And without it, you suffocate slowly, quietly, internally. So now, you breathe, and the relationships around you change. Some deepen, because they are built on honesty now. Some fade, because they relied on your lack of boundaries to exist. You let both outcomes unfold, without forcing either, because alignment has become more important to you than attachment. You notice it in your silence. Silence is no longer empty. Silence is now home. You no longer rush to fill the quiet. You no longer fear your own thoughts. You no longer drown your emotions with noise. You sit with yourself, comfortably. Your mind speaks. And instead of shutting it down, you listen. Your heart whispers. And instead of ignoring it, you honor it. Your intuition guides. And instead of doubting it, you trust it. And in this stillness, you realize something extraordinary. You are no longer running from yourself. You are living with yourself. Gently, honestly, compassionately. You notice it in the way you carry pain. Pain did not disappear just because you began to grow. Life still has sharp edges. Loss still happens. Change still arrives uninvited. Goodbyes still sting. But your relationship with pain has changed completely. You no longer see pain as a personal failure. You no longer collapse into hopelessness. You allow yourself to feel, but you do not drown. You grieve, but you do not become grief. You bend, but you do not break, because somewhere deep inside, you trust your ability to return to yourself. And that trust is a lighthouse inside every storm. You notice it in the way you speak to yourself. Your inner voice, once sharp, critical, unforgiving, has softened. You no longer insult yourself for being human. You no longer punish yourself for learning slowly. You no longer carry shame like a second skin. You correct yourself gently. You guide yourself kindly. You motivate yourself with compassion instead of cruelty. You say things like, "I'm learning. I handled that better than before. I'm proud of the progress nobody sees. I forgive myself for not knowing sooner. I believe in the person I'm becoming." And slowly, your nervous system heals, because it is finally being spoken to in the language of patience and love. You notice it in the way you choose your life. You don't chase chaos anymore. You don't confuse intensity with connection. You don't romanticize emotional turbulence. You don't tolerate environments where peace cannot survive. You choose clarity. You choose calmness. You choose emotional maturity. You choose honesty. You choose people who communicate directly. You choose spaces where your soul does not flinch, not because you are fragile, but because you have learned that your well-being is not negotiable. And with this awareness, your path becomes clearer. Your steps become intentional. Your choices become aligned. You notice it in your relationship with time. You no longer rush your journey. You no longer force outcomes. You no longer demand immediate transformation. You no longer compare your pace to others. You trust the unfolding. You trust that what is meant for you will not require you to betray yourself to receive it. You trust that what doesn't arrive is not a punishment, but a protection, and this trust creates a patience that feels like peace. You notice it when you look back. There comes a moment when you pause in your life and look behind you, and you are stunned, not because you regret your past, but because you suddenly understand how far you have truly come. You remember the nights where you cried silently, so no one would worry. You remember the moments where you felt invisible, even in crowded rooms. You remember the days where you carried so much emotional weight that even breathing felt heavy. You remember the confusion, the self-doubt, the pain of not knowing where your life was going. And then you look at yourself now, the awareness, the depth, the groundedness, the self-respect, the peace, the clarity, the emotional strength, and you whisper inwardly, I didn't realize I was becoming someone new the entire time. Not suddenly, but slowly, quietly, gracefully, from the inside out. You notice it most in how you love. You no longer love from emptiness. You no longer cling. You no longer beg. You no longer shrink. You no longer abandon yourself just to stay close to someone else. You now love from fullness. You give freely without losing yourself. You receive openly without suspicion. You choose connection without desperation. And if someone cannot meet you with the same emotional honesty, you release them, not from bitterness, but from acceptance. Because love is no longer something you chase. Love is something you are. And eventually, you realize something sacred. Transformation isn't something that happened to you. Transformation is who you became by finally returning to yourself. It wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about removing everything that wasn't truly you. The fear, the doubt, the guilt, the shame, the conditioning, the expectations, the self-betrayal, the noise, until all that remained was your authentic self, clear, calm, grounded, peaceful, whole. And now you walk through life, not seeking your power, but living from it, not seeking your worth, but embodying it, not seeking your path, but walking it consciously, gently, courageously. And this is the moment where transformation becomes identity, not because the world changed, but because you finally did. Chapter 10. The rest of your life begins within you. There comes a gentle moment at the end of every journey where you stop, you breathe, and you finally look at the path behind you and the horizon ahead. And in that still moment, you realize something profound. You did not just change your habits. You did not just change your thoughts. You did not just change your routines. You changed your relationship with yourself. And that changes everything. Because when you heal the way you see yourself, you heal the way you live your life. you begin to understand something simple, yet powerful enough to rewrite your entire future. The rest of your life does not begin somewhere far away. It begins inside you, right here, right now. Not in the next achievement, not in the next chapter, not in the next version of you, but in the person who is listening, in this very moment. You finally see the journey for what it truly was. This was never about becoming perfect. It was never about becoming untouchable, emotionless, or flawless. This journey was about returning to your heart, about learning to live gently and honestly with yourself, about remembering that you deserve respect from your own spirit, not only from the world outside you. Every chapter, every lesson, every reflection was guiding you home to self-awareness, self-respect, self-trust, self-compassion, inner peace, alignment, purpose, honesty, presence. Home to the place inside you that always knew you were meant to live fully, not just survive. You realize that growth is not a destination, it's a relationship. You now understand there is no final version of you, no finish line, no point where you say, I am done, I am complete, there is nothing more to learn. Life doesn't work that way. Growth is not a race to the end. Growth is a relationship with your own becoming, a lifelong companionship between you and the person you are evolving into. Some days will feel clear, some days will feel confusing, some days will flow smoothly, some days will feel heavy, and that's okay, because transformation is not perfection. Transformation is commitment, a commitment to keep choosing awareness instead of avoidance, healing instead of self-abandonment, truth instead of pretending, peace instead of chaos, love instead of fear. And when you make that commitment with your whole heart, your life does not suddenly become perfect, but it becomes deeply real. And real is where fulfillment lives. You see that you are no longer the same, and you never will be again. You cannot unlearn what you now know. You cannot unfeel your worth. You cannot unsee your patterns. You cannot unknow your strength. You cannot shrink back into the smallness you once squeezed yourself into. You may stumble. You may fall. You may feel lost again at times, but you will never truly be lost the way you once were, because now you have a compass, a map written inside your soul, made of all the lessons you have lived, and it will always guide you back to yourself. Always. You begin to treat your life as something sacred. You begin to hold your days gently. You speak to yourself with tenderness. You let your mind rest. You slow down. You allow space. You release what isn't meant for you without trying to force it to stay. You no longer tolerate chaos where peace is possible. You no longer tolerate disrespect where love is meant to exist. You no longer tolerate pretending where your truth is asking to breathe. You honor your story. You honor your needs. You honor your emotions. You honor your becoming. Because now you understand your life is not something to survive. It is something to experience with presence, depth, honesty, and heart. And that realization softens you in the most beautiful way. You understand that you are allowed to continue becoming. You are allowed to change direction. You are allowed to grow beyond what you once accepted. You are allowed to redefine what matters to you. You are allowed to choose differently than you did yesterday. You are allowed to continue becoming without guilt, without apology, without needing permission, because life is not asking you to stay the same. Life is inviting you to keep evolving, descending deeper into truth, into peace, into alignment, into love, into yourself. And the more you honor that invitation, the more fulfilling your life becomes. You begin to trust the journey ahead, even without knowing where it leads. You no longer need certainty to feel safe, because you have finally found safety within your own presence. And so you walk forward, not with fear, but with trust. Trust in your resilience. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in your intuition. Trust in your growth. Trust that whatever life brings, you will meet it with compassion, wisdom, and courage. You walk forward gently, not running, not chasing, not forcing, just walking, present, open, aligned, and that is enough, more than enough. You realize that the greatest love story of your life is the one you have with yourself, not out of ego, not out of isolation, but out of truth, because you are the only person who will walk with you from your first breath to your last. And now you have learned how to walk with yourself, in love, in respect, in honesty, in loyalty, in peace. You are no longer the enemy within your own mind. You have become your own safe place, your own ally, your own source of grounding strength. And from that place, every relationship in your life will deepen, not because others change, but because you are finally meeting them as a whole being, not empty, not searching desperately, but full, open, present, true. And as this chapter comes to a close, you understand something eternal. Nothing you learned here was temporary. These were not motivational words meant to lift you for a moment. These were reminders of who you are capable of being every single day. A being of depth, a being of awareness, a being of compassion, a being of strength, a being of peace, a being of truth, a being of love. And the beautiful truth is, you do not need to force any of this, because this is your natural state, when fear no longer leads your life. So as this story softens to silence, you carry forward something priceless, a quiet knowing that you can always return to yourself. No matter what happens, no matter what changes, no matter how life unfolds, you will always know the way back home, because home has never been a place. Home has always been you. And so, the journey continues. There is no ending here, just a gentle beginning that unfolds every time you choose presence over distraction, honesty over avoidance, peace over chaos, self-respect over self-abandonment, love over fear. And if you ever forget, all you have to do is return to the truth that lives quietly within your heart. You are worthy of a life that feels real, peaceful, aligned, and deeply your own. And now, you finally know how to live it. And now, as the final words of this journey begin to fade into silence, there is nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase, nothing left to become, except the truest version of yourself. You have walked through honesty. You have faced your patterns. You have rebuilt trust within your own heart. You have learned peace. You have remembered your worth. You have returned home to yourself, not as a finished masterpiece, but as a living, breathing, evolving soul who is willing to grow with grace. And that willingness is everything, because life will continue. There will still be laughter. There will still be tears. There will still be learning, unlearning, loving, releasing. beginnings and endings, woven gently together. But now, you will not meet life as the person you once were. You will meet it as someone who knows how to listen inwardly, how to honor your truth, how to choose peace, how to stand softly in your worth, without needing the world to clap for you. You will meet it as someone who no longer abandons themselves. And that changes the way every moment feels. So let this not be the end of a book, but the beginning of a promise that you will continue to walk gently with yourself, to speak kindly to yourself, to forgive yourself when you stumble, to rise with patience, to love with honesty, to live with presence, to choose alignment over noise. And whenever the world becomes loud, whenever your path feels uncertain, whenever old fears return and shadows begin to whisper, remember this: you do not need to run. You do not need to hide. You do not need to pretend, because you now carry within you something unshakable, a quiet, steady, grounded truth. You are safe inside yourself. You are worthy of your own respect. You are capable of beautiful change. And you are allowed to build a life that feels like peace from the inside out. So breathe, be gentle, take your time, and walk forward, not as the person you were told to be, but as the person your soul has always known you could become. This is your life, your journey, your becoming. And the most beautiful part is, you're only just beginning.